I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with a message that made my blood run cold. Just met with a nice couple who are buying the cabin next to ours, the one the HOA said was part of the community lakefront property. The text was from my neighbor, Bill, who lived 3 houses down from my family's lake cabin in northern Minnesota. My family's lake cabin, the one my grandfather built with his own hands in 1968, the one that sat on 2 acres of prime lakefront property on Lake Vermilion. The one that had been in my family for nearly 60 years. I read the message 3 more times, each time feeling my heart rate climb higher. Community property, my cabin. I immediately called Bill, not bothering with pleasantries when he picked up. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "What couple? What did they say exactly?" Bill sighed on the other end. "Henry, I thought you knew. There's a couple from Minneapolis, the Johnsons, who came up here last weekend. They were walking around your property with that HOA president, what's her name, Patricia something. They were talking about how they're so excited to finally have lakefront access through the community property." "Patricia Randall," I said through gritted teeth. "And my cabin is not community property, Bill. It's mine. I have the deed." "Well, that's not what Patricia told them. She had some fancy folder with documents and everything. The couple seemed really happy about it. They were talking about bringing their boat up and using your dock." My dock. The one I had replaced just 2 years ago out of my own pocket. The dock attached to my property. I hung up with Bill and immediately started digging through my filing cabinet. The HOA had been a thorn in my side since they formed 3 years ago, but this was beyond their usual petty complaints about grass height or mailbox colors. This was fraud. This was them trying to steal my property. Let me back up and explain how we even ended up with an HOA in the first place. Lake Vermilion is in northeastern Minnesota, about 20 miles south of the Canadian border. It's a sprawling, beautiful lake with over 365 islands and nearly 1,200 miles of shoreline. My grandfather, Harold Thompson, yes, I was named after him, bought 2 acres of pristine lakefront property back when land was cheap and developers hadn't discovered the area yet. He built a small 2-bedroom cabin himself, adding onto it over the years. When he passed in 2003, the cabin went to my father, Harrison Thompson SR, and when Dad died in 2019, it came to me, Harrison Thompson Jr., though everyone calls me Henry. The cabin was always meant to be a family retreat. My wife Sarah and I brought our kids up here every summer. My sister brought her family. It was our sanctuary, our connection to our grandfather's legacy. The problem started in 2021 when a developer bought up a bunch of the surrounding properties and built a small community of vacation homes called Pine Lake Estates. Fancy places, each one running about $800,000. The developer created an HOA to manage the community amenities, a small beach area on a different part of the lake, a playground, some hiking trails on the communal land. My property was never part of the development. I had never signed anything with the developer. I had never agreed to join any HOA. But Patricia Randall, a real estate agent from Duluth who bought one of the new vacation homes, decided she was going to run the HOA like her personal fiefdom. And apparently, she had decided that my property, which had frontage on the best part of the lake, with a natural sandy beach and deep water perfect for boats, should belong to everyone. I found my deed in the filing cabinet, along with all the survey documents from when Dad had the property resurveyed in 2015. Everything was crystal clear. The property line extended from County Road 77 down to the lake, a total of 400 feet of lake frontage. There was no ambiguity, no shared easements, nothing that would suggest this was anything other than private property. I also found the letters. Oh, the letters. Patricia had been sending me increasingly aggressive letters for the past year. It started with a friendly reminder that all properties in the area were subject to HOA rules. I had written back explaining that my property predated the HOA by decades, and I had never joined. Then came a letter saying I owed 3 years of back dues, $2,400. I ignored it. Then came a letter saying I was in violation of HOA rules for having a non-conforming dock. Then one about my cabin's exterior paint color. Then one threatening legal action if I didn't comply. I had ignored most of them because they were ridiculous. My property wasn't in the HOA. But apparently, ignoring Patricia Randall was like ignoring a wasp nest. The problem only got bigger and angrier. I called my wife. Sarah answered on the second ring. "Hey, honey, what's up?" "The HOA is trying to steal the cabin," I said flatly. There was a pause. "What?" I explained what Bill had told me about the couple from Minneapolis, about Patricia showing them around my property and claiming it was community lakefront. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Henry, this is insane. Can she do that?" "No, she absolutely cannot do that." "But she's apparently doing it anyway. I need to call a lawyer." "Do we know any real estate lawyers?" I thought for a moment. "Mike Hendricks, remember him? We went to college with his wife. He does real estate law in Duluth. Call him now. This is serious, Henry. If she's actually showing your property to buyers, telling them it's theirs to use, this is fraud. This is a big deal." She was right. This wasn't just some annoying HOA overreach. This was Patricia Randall actively trying to take my property through some kind of elaborate scam. I called Mike Hendricks' office and got lucky. His secretary said he had a cancellation and could see me that afternoon if I could make it to Duluth. I told her I'd be there. The drive to Duluth took about an hour and a half. I spent the entire time mentally rehearsing what I'd say, getting angrier with each passing mile. How dare Patricia do this? What was her end game? Was she trying to force me to sell? Was she trying to actually steal my property? And who were these buyers? Did they know they were being scammed? Or were they innocent victims of Patricia's scheme? Mike's office was in a modern building downtown with a view of Lake Superior. He greeted me warmly when I arrived, though his expression turned serious when I explained why I was there. "Let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "This HOA president is telling potential buyers that your private property is part of their community lakefront access. That's exactly what's happening. My neighbor saw her giving them a tour of my property. They were talking about using my dock." Mike shook his head slowly. "Henry, this is beyond HOA overreach. This is fraud, possibly attempted theft by deception. If she's representing property she doesn't own as part of a real estate transaction, that's a serious crime. So what do I do?" "First, we establish the facts. You're certain your property was never part of this development?" "Absolutely certain. My grandfather built the cabin in 1968. The development didn't exist until 2021. I never signed anything, never agreed to join the HOA, never paid dues." "You have your deed." I pulled out the folder I'd brought with me. Mike spent several minutes examining the deed, the survey documents, and the tax records I'd included showing I had been paying property taxes on the parcel for years. "This is very clear," he said. "Your property is a separate legal parcel. It was never included in the development plat. You're not part of the HOA and you never have been." He looked up at me. "Have you received any legal documents from the HOA? Any actual claims to your property?" I pulled out the stack of letters from Patricia. Mike read through them, his frown deepening. "These are harassment," he said, "but they don't actually claim ownership of your property. They're just trying to force you to comply with HOA rules that don't apply to you." He set the letters down. but what your neighbor described is different. If she's actively representing your property as community property to buyers, we need to stop this immediately. How? We need to find out who these buyers are and what exactly Patricia told them. Then we need to send a cease and desist letter to the HOA and to Patricia personally. And depending on how serious this is, we might need to involve law enforcement. You think this is criminal? If she's attempting to sell or transfer property she doesn't own, yes, that's criminal fraud. But let's gather more information first. Do you know the names of these potential buyers? Bill said they were named Johnson, from Minneapolis. Mike made a note. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter tonight. We'll send it certified mail to Patricia Randall, to the HOA board, and to the HOA's registered agent. The letter will make it crystal clear that your property is not part of the HOA and any representation to the contrary is fraudulent. We'll also include copies of your deed and survey. What if she ignores it? Then we escalate. We can file for a restraining order, we can report her to the police for fraud, and we can sue her personally and the HOA for damages. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. Often, a strongly worded letter from an attorney is enough to make people back down. I wanted to believe that, but I had dealt with Patricia Randall for 3 years now. She wasn't the backing down type. There's one more thing, Mike said. You should go up to the cabin this weekend. Be present on your property. If she's showing it to people, you have every right to be there and to tell those people the truth. In fact, I'd recommend you do exactly that. Just show up and confront her. It's your property, Henry. You don't need permission to be there. And if she's there with potential buyers, telling them lies about your land, you have every right to correct the record. I liked that idea. I liked it a lot. Mike said he'd have the cease and desist letter ready by Friday. In the meantime, he suggested I do some research, find out what I could about the Johnsons and what exactly they'd been told. I drove back home and immediately called Bill again. Did you talk to these people? The Johnsons? A little bit, Bill said. They seemed nice. Young couple, probably early 30s. They were really excited about the lake access. Did they say where they were buying a house? Yeah, the new construction at the end of Pine Ridge Drive. The big 3-story one with the wraparound deck. I knew the house he meant. It was one of the most expensive properties in the development, probably close to $1 million, which meant these buyers had money and were making a significant investment based on Patricia's lies. Bill, if you see them again, can you get their contact information? Or at least let me know when they're around. Sure thing. But Henry, be careful. Patricia doesn't like being challenged. I don't care what Patricia likes. She's trying to steal my property. That Friday, Mike emailed me the cease and desist letter. It was 5 pages of legal language that boiled down to: Henry Thompson owns this property. It's not part of your HOA. Stop saying it is or face legal consequences. Mike had included copies of all my documentation and sent it to Patricia, to the 5-member HOA board, and to the HOA's registered agent in the state filing. Saturday morning, I drove up to the cabin. It was mid-May, and the weather was perfect sunny, about 70 degrees with a light breeze coming off the lake. The cabin looked exactly as I'd left it 3 weeks earlier. I unlocked the door, aired the place out, and then sat on the porch with a beer, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. Around 2 in the afternoon, I heard voices coming from the direction of the road. I walked around the side of the cabin and saw Patricia Randall leading a young couple down the path toward my beach. The couple was holding hands, looking excited. Patricia was gesturing grandly, like a tour guide showing off a national monument. And this is the best part of the community lakefront, Patricia was saying as they approached. The water is deep enough here for boats, and the beach is natural sand, much nicer than the public access point. As community members, you'll have full access to. Excuse me, I called out, walking toward them. Can I help you? Patricia's head snapped toward me. Her expression went from surprise to furious in about half a second. Patricia was 52 years old, with highlighted blonde hair cut in an aggressive bob and the kind of tan that came from too much time in tanning beds. She was wearing white capri pants and a pink polo shirt with the Pine Lake Estates logo embroidered on it. "This is private property," Patricia said icily. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The young couple looked confused. The woman, petite with dark hair, looked between Patricia and me uncertainly. "You're absolutely right," I said calmly. "This is private property, my private property. I'm Henry Thompson. I own this cabin and these 2 acres of lakefront." Patricia's face went red. "This is community property, part of Pine Lake Estates. You're trespassing." "No, Patricia, you're trespassing and you're committing fraud." I turned to the couple. "Hi, I'm sorry you got dragged into this. I'm Henry Thompson. My grandfather built this cabin in 1968. My family has owned it continuously since then. This property is not and has never been part of Pine Lake Estates or the HOA. The young man, tall, wearing khakis and a polo shirt, looked at Patricia. "What's he talking about? He's confused," Patricia said quickly. "This property is part of the community association. It's clearly marked in the HOA documents." "That's a lie," I said flatly. "And you know it's a lie, Patricia, because you received a cease and desist letter from my attorney yesterday. I have the certified mail receipt showing you signed for it." Patricia's eyes widened slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about, really." "Because my lawyer, Mike Hendricks, sent a 5-page letter to you personally, along with copies of my deed, my survey, and my tax records, all proving that this property is mine and has nothing to do with your HOA." The young woman looked upset now. "Patricia, what's going on?" "You said the lakefront was part of the community amenities." "It is," Patricia insisted. "He's trying to confuse you. Some of the older property owners are upset about the new development and they're trying to make trouble." I pulled out my phone. "I have the deed right here. I can show you." "This property is legally described as Lot 31, Section 14, Township 62 North, Range 15 West. It's a separate legal parcel that was never part of the Pine Lake Estates plat." "Don't listen to him," Patricia said, her voice rising. "He's not even supposed to be here." "I own this property," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have every right to be here. You, on the other hand, are trespassing on my land and committing fraud by misrepresenting my property to potential buyers." The young man pulled out his phone. "Let me call our real estate agent." "This doesn't sound right." "That's a good idea," I said. "You should also ask to see the actual plat for Pine Lake Estates. This parcel isn't on it. You can verify that with the county recorder's office." Patricia looked like she wanted to explode. "You need to leave now." "Or what?" I asked. "You'll call the police. Please do. I'd love to explain to them how you're trying to steal my property." The young couple was backing away now, clearly uncomfortable. "Patricia, we need to talk to our agent," the woman said. "This is really concerning." "There's nothing to be concerned about," Patricia said desperately. "He's just trying to cause problems." The HOA has rights to this property through established use. And there's no such thing as established use over private property in Minnesota without adverse possession, which requires 20 years of hostile, open, and continuous use, I said. Your development is 3 years old. You have no claim to this property whatsoever. I didn't actually know if I was getting all the legal details right, but it sounded good, and Patricia's expression suggested I was close enough. The young man put his phone to his ear. "Hi, Rebecca. It's Tom Johnson. We're at the lake property and there's a situation. Someone is claiming the lakefront isn't actually part of the community property." Patricia made a disgusted sound. "This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I know what property belongs to the community." "Then show them the deed," I said. "Show them the legal documentation that proves this is community property." "I don't have to show you anything." "You're right, you don't have to show me. But you should probably show the Johnsons here, since you're asking them to invest $1 million in a house based partly on access to this lakefront." Tom Johnson lowered his phone. "Our agent is coming up here. She's about 20 minutes away. She says we shouldn't make any decisions until she looks at the documentation." "That's very wise," I said. "In the meantime, I need to ask all of you to leave my property. Patricia, you've been served with a cease and desist letter. If you continue to represent this property as part of the HOA, I will pursue legal action against you personally." "You can't threaten me," Patricia sputtered. "That's not a threat. It's a statement of fact. If you continue to commit fraud, there will be legal consequences." The Johnsons were already walking back toward the road. Patricia glared at me with pure hatred before following them. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You're right," I said. "If you don't stop lying about my property, it's just beginning." I watched them leave, my heart pounding. That had been more confrontational than I was usually comfortable with, but I couldn't let Patricia continue to mislead buyers. I called Mike immediately and told him what had happened. He listened carefully, then said, "Good. You handled that exactly right. You stated the facts, you mentioned the cease and desist, and you didn't back down. Now we wait and see what she does next. You think she'll stop? Hard to say. Some people, when confronted with clear evidence they're wrong, they back down. Others double down." Patricia sounds like the doubling down type. He was right about that. Monday morning, I received an email from the HOA's lawyer, not Patricia, an actual attorney. The email informed me that the HOA was claiming an easement over my property based on historical community use, and that if I didn't cease interfering with community members' access to the lakefront, they would seek a court order. I forwarded the email to Mike. He called me 10 minutes later and I could hear the anger in his voice. "This is insane," he said. "There's no easement, there's no historical use. The development is 3 years old. They have absolutely no legal basis for this claim." "So what do? We respond, strongly. "And Henry, I think we need to go on offense here. We should file a lawsuit against the HOA and Patricia Randall personally for slander of title and fraud. We need to put this to bed permanently." "How much is that going to cost?" "Honestly, probably $15,000 to $20,000 if it goes to trial. But I think once we file, they'll back down. No legitimate attorney is going to defend this case. They have no legal leg to stand on." I thought about it. $20,000 was a lot of money. But the cabin was worth probably $400,000, and if Patricia's lies affected my ability to sell it or use it, the damage could be much worse. "Do it," I said. "File the lawsuit." Mike prepared the complaint over the next week. We sued the HOA and Patricia Randall personally for slander of title, fraud, trespass, and harassment. We asked for damages, attorney's fees, and a permanent injunction preventing them from claiming any interest in my property. The lawsuit was filed on May 30th. Patricia was served with the papers on June 2nd. According to the process server, she screamed at him and slammed the door in his face. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a woman's voice said, "Mr. Thompson, this is Rebecca Winters. I'm the real estate agent representing Tom and Amanda Johnson." "Yes. I wanted to reach out to you directly. I've been doing some research after what happened at your property last weekend. I pulled the plat for Pine Lake Estates and the deed records for your parcel. You're absolutely right, your property was never part of the development. I tried to tell them that. I know, and I'm sorry they were put in this position. Patricia Randall showed me HOA documents that supposedly established community rights to your lakefront. I believed her because she's the HOA president, and I had no reason to think she was lying. But after checking with the county, it's clear those documents are fabricated or at least grossly misrepresent the situation. So what happens now? Well, the Johnsons have withdrawn their offer on the house. They were told that lakefront access was one of the key amenities, and without it, they're not interested in the property at that price point. I've also reported Patricia to the Minnesota Association of Realtors. She's a licensed agent, and this is a serious ethics violation. Good. She shouldn't be allowed to lie to buyers. I agree. Mr. Thompson, I wanted to ask, are any other properties in Pine Lake Estates affected by this? Did Patricia misrepresent anything else? I have no idea, but given what she tried to do with my property, I wouldn't be surprised. Rebecca sighed. This is a nightmare. I have 3 other pending sales in that development. Now I have to verify every single thing Patricia told me. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Maybe you should have done that before. You're right. This is partially my fault for taking the HOA president at her word. I won't make that mistake again. After I hung up, I felt a grim satisfaction. At least the Johnsons wouldn't be scammed. But I knew Patricia wouldn't take this lying down. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I received notice that the HOA was countersuing me for harassment, defamation, and tortious interference with business relationships. They claimed I had deliberately sabotaged the sale of the house to the Johnsons and damaged the reputation of Pine Lake Estates. Mike actually laughed when he saw the counterclaim. This is ridiculous. They're just trying to intimidate you. Don't worry, this will get thrown out. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like Patricia Randall was escalating a war I had never wanted to fight. The case was assigned to Judge Marion Fletcher in Lake County District Court. Our first hearing was scheduled for August 15th. In the meantime, Mike filed a motion for summary judgment on our claims, arguing that the facts were so clear that no trial was necessary. The judge could just rule in our favor based on the documents. Throughout July, I drove up to the cabin most weekends. I wanted to establish my presence, and I wanted to make sure Patricia wasn't continuing to show my property to potential buyers. I also installed some tasteful private property no trespassing signs along my property line. On the last weekend of July, I arrived at the cabin on Friday evening to find the signs torn down and thrown in the woods. I also found fresh tire tracks on my beach and footprints in the sand. Someone had been on my property, probably multiple someones. I called the Lake County Sheriff's Office and filed a report. The deputy who came out was sympathetic but said unless I had cameras or witnesses, there wasn't much he could do. But if it happens again, he said, call us immediately. If we can catch someone in the act, we can charge them with trespassing. I went to town the next day and bought trail cameras. I set up 3 of them in hidden locations around the property, positioned to capture anyone who came down to the beach or walked around the cabin. The cameras paid off the following weekend. I reviewed the footage and found video of Patricia Randall and 2 men I didn't recognize walking around my property on Tuesday afternoon. They were measuring the beach area and the dock, and one of the men was taking photographs. I immediately sent the footage to Mike. This is perfect, he said. She's violating the cease and desist order. We can use this at the hearing. The hearing on August 15th was at the Lake County Courthouse in 2 Harbors. It was a small, older building with wooden benches and tall windows. Mike and I arrived early. Patricia showed up with the HOA's lawyer, a man named Dennis Keller who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Judge Fletcher was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She called the case, and we all sat at our respective tables. Mike stood up. "Your Honor, the facts of this case are straightforward. My client, Henry Thompson, owns a parcel of land that has been in his family since 1968. The defendant HOA was formed in 2021 as part of a new development adjacent to, but not including, my client's property. Despite being served with a cease and desist letter, and despite clear title evidence, the HOA and Miss Randall have continued to represent Mr. Thompson's property as community property. They've shown it to potential buyers, they've trespassed on it repeatedly, and they've slandered his title by claiming rights they don't possess." Dennis Keller stood up. "Your Honor, the HOA's position is that the boundaries of the community property are unclear, and that historical use patterns establish an implied easement for community access to the lakeshore." Judge Fletcher looked at him over her reading glasses. "The development is 3 years old." "What historical use are you talking about?" Keller looked uncomfortable. "The area has been used by local residents for decades, Your Honor. Mr. Thompson's property has been used by local residents, or the HOA's property has been used by local residents." "The distinction is unclear, Your Honor." "The distinction seems very clear to me, counsel. Mr. Thompson has a recorded deed going back to 1968. Where's your deed to this property?" "We don't claim to own the property, Your Honor. We claim an easement." "Based on what?" 3 years of use." "That's not how easements work in Minnesota, and you know it." The hearing went downhill from there for Patricia and the HOA. Judge Fletcher reviewed the evidence: my deed, my surveys, my tax records, the photos and videos of Patricia trespassing, the testimony from Rebecca Winters about Patricia's misrepresentations to the Johnsons. After about 90 minutes, Judge Fletcher had heard enough. She ruled from the bench. "I'm granting summary judgment in favor of Mr. Thompson on all claims. The evidence is overwhelming that he owns this property and that the defendants have no legitimate claim to it. Miss Randall, you are hereby ordered to cease and desist from representing Mr. Thompson's property as HOA property. You are not to trespass on it. You are not to show it to potential buyers, and you are not to make any statements suggesting the HOA has any rights to it. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt of court." She turned to Dennis Keller. "As for the counterclaims, they're dismissed. Mr. Thompson was exercising his legal rights to protect his property. There's no harassment, no defamation, and no tortious interference. The HOA brought this on themselves by making false claims." Then she addressed Patricia directly. "Miss Randall, I'm troubled by your conduct in this case. You're a licensed real estate professional. You should know better than to misrepresent property rights. I'm forwarding a copy of this order to the Minnesota Department of Commerce for their review of your license." Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. Her face was bright red, and I could see her hands shaking. Judge Fletcher continued. "As for damages and attorney's fees, I'm awarding Mr. Thompson $15,000 to cover his legal costs. The HOA will pay this amount within 90 days. She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. Mike shook my hand. "That's as good an outcome as we could have hoped for." Patricia stormed out of the courtroom without looking at me. Dennis Keller approached Mike and me with an apologetic expression. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I advised the board not to fight this." Patricia insisted. She told us she had documentation proving the property was part of the HOA. Obviously, that wasn't true. "You might want to get a new HOA president," Mike said. "That's above my pay grade," Keller replied. But yeah, I suspect there's going to be a vote on that soon. Over the next few weeks, I heard through Bill that things were getting ugly in Pine Lake Estates. Several homeowners were furious that the HOA had wasted their dues money on a frivolous lawsuit. A petition was circulating to remove Patricia from the board. And the Minnesota Association of Realtors had opened an investigation into her conduct. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. On September 3rd, I drove up to the cabin for the Labor Day weekend. When I arrived, I found the place vandalized. Someone had spray-painted obscenities on the side of the cabin. They'd smashed 2 windows. They'd cut the lines on my dock, setting it adrift into the lake. The damage was probably $5,000 or $6,000. I was furious. I called the sheriff's office immediately. A different deputy came out, a younger guy named Stevens. He took photos and a report, but again, without witnesses or evidence, there wasn't much he could do. "Check your cameras," he suggested. "You said you have trail cameras set up." I had forgotten about the cameras in my anger. I retrieved them and reviewed the footage. What I found made my blood boil. Patricia Randall had come to my property at 11 o'clock the previous night. She was alone. The footage showed her spray-painting the cabin, smashing the windows with a rock, and cutting the dock lines with a knife. The camera had night vision and her face was clearly visible. I called Deputy Stevens back immediately. He returned within an hour and I showed him the footage. "Well," he said, watching the video, "that's vandalism, criminal damage to property, and trespassing. I'll need to take this footage as evidence, and I'll be issuing a warrant for Miss Randall's arrest." "Good," I said. Patricia Randall was arrested the following day. According to Bill, who witnessed it, 2 sheriff's deputies showed up at her vacation house and took her away in handcuffs. She was charged with criminal damage to property, a felony because the damage exceeded $1,000, as well as misdemeanor trespassing. The news spread through Pine Lake Estates like wildfire. Within a week, Patricia had resigned from the HOA board for personal reasons. The Minnesota Department of Commerce suspended her real estate license pending the outcome of the criminal case. And several homeowners in Pine Lake Estates contacted me to apologize for Patricia's behavior. Patricia's criminal trial was set for November. In the meantime, I repaired the damage to the cabin and added more cameras. I also increased my insurance coverage, just in case Patricia decided to do something even more destructive. The trial was brief. Patricia's lawyer, a different one this time, a criminal defense attorney, tried to argue that the footage was inconclusive and that it could have been someone else. But the prosecution had enhanced the video, and Patricia's face was unmistakable. They also had her cell phone records showing she'd been in the area at the time of the vandalism. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding her guilty on all counts. Judge Fletcher, who also handled criminal cases, sentenced Patricia to 90 days in jail, 2 years of probation, and ordered her to pay restitution for the damage to my cabin. As Patricia was led out of the courtroom, she looked at me with pure hatred, but I didn't care. She had brought this entirely on herself. After the sentencing, the new HOA board president, a retired engineer named Walter Chen, reached out to me. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted to apologize on behalf of the HOA. What Patricia did was inexcusable. The board has reviewed all the documentation, and we completely acknowledge that your property is not part of Pine Lake Estates and never has been." "I appreciate that," I said. "We've also corrected all the HOA documents to make it clear that the only lakefront access is the small beach area on the north side of the development. We don't want any future confusion." "That sounds wise. And if you ever have any issues with HOA members trespassing on your property, Please let us know immediately. We'll deal with it." I thanked him. It was nice to finally have reasonable people running the HOA. In December, I received the restitution payment from Patricia, $5,847, to cover the repairs and my increased insurance premiums. I also received the $15,000 judgment from the HOA for attorney's fees, which I promptly used to pay off Mike's bill. That Christmas, Sarah and I took the kids up to the cabin. It was cold with snow covering everything, but the wood stove kept us warm. We spent 3 days there, playing board games, drinking hot chocolate, and enjoying the peace and quiet. On Christmas Eve, as we sat around the fireplace, my son Michael asked, "Dad, are we going to keep the cabin forever?" I looked around at the rustic interior my grandfather had built, at the family photos on the walls, at the view of the frozen lake through the windows. "Yes," I said. "We're keeping it forever. This cabin has been in our family for almost 60 years, and it's going to stay in our family. Your grandfather would have wanted that, even though that mean lady tried to take it, especially because of that," I said. Sometimes people try to take things that don't belong to them, but we stood up for what was right and we protected what's ours. That's an important lesson. Sarah squeezed my hand. "Your dad fought hard for this place. We all did." And it was true. The battle with Patricia and the HOA had been exhausting, expensive, and stressful, but it had been worth it. The cabin was ours, free and clear, with a court order to prove it. In January, I heard through Bill that Patricia had been released from jail after serving 60 days. She sold her vacation house in Pine Lake Estates and moved back to Duluth. I never saw her again. The new HOA board turned out to be competent and reasonable. They focused on maintaining the actual community property and left me alone. A few times over the next year, I'd see Pine Lake Estates residents walking on the public trail that ran near my property, and they'd wave politely and keep moving. No one tried to use my beach or my dock. In the spring of 2025, Tom and Amanda Johnson, the couple Patricia had tried to scam, ended up buying a different house in the area, one on the south shore of Lake Vermilion with its own private lakefront. I ran into them at the grocery store in Tower, and we had a good laugh about the whole situation. "Thanks for being honest with us," Tom said. "If we'd bought that house in Pine Lake Estates based on Patricia's lies, we'd have been furious when we found out the truth." "I'm just glad you didn't get scammed," I said. "We love our new place," Amanda added. "And we have actual lakefront that actually belongs to us." Looking back on the whole ordeal, I learned a few important lessons. First, documentation is everything. If I hadn't had my deed, my surveys, and my tax records organized and accessible, the fight would have been much harder. Second, some people will try to take advantage of you, and you have to be willing to stand up for yourself. If I had ignored Patricia's initial letters and her attempts to claim my property, things could have gone much worse. Third, a good lawyer is worth their weight in gold. Mike Hendricks saved me probably hundreds of thousands of dollars and untold aggravation. Most importantly, I learned that family legacies are worth fighting for. My grandfather built that cabin with his own hands. My father maintained it and improved it. And now it was my responsibility to protect it and pass it on to my children. Patricia Randall tried to steal that legacy, but she failed. The cabin still stands on Lake Vermilion, just as it has for nearly 60 years. My family still goes there every summer. My kids bring their friends. Sarah and I host 4th of July parties. And every time I sit on that porch, looking out at the lake, I think about my grandfather and how proud he'd be that we kept his cabin in the family. As for HOAs, I learned to be very wary of them. They can be useful for managing shared amenities and maintaining property values, but they can also be abused by petty tyrants like Patricia who think they have power over everyone. If you're not part of an HOA, don't let them bully you into thinking you are. Know your property rights. Keep your documentation organized, and don't be afraid to get a lawyer if someone tries to overstep. The final postscript to the story came in March of 2025. I received a letter from the Minnesota Department of Commerce informing me that Patricia Randall's real estate license had been permanently revoked. The letter cited her fraudulent misrepresentation of property rights, her criminal conviction, and her violation of professional ethics standards. I filed the letter away with all the other documents from the case. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I just felt tired. The whole thing had been such a waste of time, waste of money, waste of energy. If Patricia had just accepted from the beginning that my property wasn't hers to control, none of this would have been necessary. But that's not how people like Patricia operate. They see something they want in this case, control over the best piece of lakefront in the area, and they convince themselves they have a right to it. They don't care about the truth or the law or other people's rights. They just care about getting their way. Well, Patricia didn't get her way. She lost her position as HOA president, lost her real estate license, lost her freedom for 60 days, and ended up with a criminal record. All because she couldn't accept that my cabin was mine. I hope she learned something from the experience, but honestly, I doubt it. People like Patricia rarely learn. They just get angry and bitter and blame everyone else for their problems, but that's not my concern anymore. My concern is my family, my cabin, and making sure both are protected and cherished for generations to come. This past summer, we had a big family reunion at the cabin. My sister and her family came. My aunt and uncle from Wisconsin came. My cousins and their kids came. We had about 20 people there, spread out between the cabin and some tents on the property. We spent a week swimming, fishing, kayaking, and just being together. On the last night, we had a bonfire on the beach. As the sun set over Lake Vermilion, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, my uncle raised his beer and said, "To Harold Thompson, who built this place, and to Henry Thompson, who saved it." Everyone raised their drinks and echoed the toast. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. My grandfather had been gone for over 20 years, but his legacy lived on in this place, in these people, in these memories. That's what Patricia Randall tried to take from me. Not just property, not just lakefront, but family history and connection and belonging. She tried to erase my grandfather's work and turn it into generic community property that would belong to everyone and therefore to no one. But she failed. The cabin stands. The family gathers. The legacy continues. And I'll make sure it stays that way. No matter how many HOA presidents or lawyers or scam artists try to take it away. This is Thompson property, and it always will be. The whole experience taught me to be vigilant. Even now, 2 years after the court case ended, I keep close tabs on the HOA's activities. I attend the occasional community meeting, just to make sure they're not trying to pull any new schemes. I maintain my property meticulously, both to honor my grandfather's work and to make it clear that this is an actively owned, actively maintained private property. I also make a point of being friendly with my neighbors. Bill has been great throughout this whole ordeal, and I've gotten to know several of the other longtime residents in the area. We look out for each other. If someone sees suspicious activity on anyone's property, we share information and watch each other's backs. The people who bought homes in Pine Lake Estates are mostly good people. They were drawn to the area by the natural beauty of Lake Vermilion, just like my grandfather was 60 years ago. Most of them had no idea about Patricia's schemes and were horrified when they learned what she'd been doing. The community has stabilized under Walter Chen's leadership, and the HOA now focuses on what it should focus on: maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and enforcing reasonable rules about property maintenance. No one mentions the community lakefront on my property anymore. It's been erased from all HOA materials, replaced with accurate descriptions of the actual HOA-owned beach area. New buyers in Pine Lake Estates get truthful information about what amenities they have access to, and no one is scammed into thinking they can use my property. Last month, I received an interesting phone call. It was from a man named Richard Henderson, who was considering buying a vacation home in a different HOA community on the other side of Lake Vermilion. He'd heard about my case with Patricia and the Pine Lake Estates HOA, and he wanted advice. "I'm looking at the HOA documents," Richard said, "and something seems off. They're claiming rights to a boat launch that I'm pretty sure is on private property." I walked him through what I'd learned: check the plat maps, verify deed descriptions, don't trust the HOA's representations without independent verification. I gave him Mike Hendrick's contact information and suggested he have a lawyer review everything before buying. "Thank you so much," Richard said. "You probably just saved me from making a huge mistake." "Happy to help," I said. "Too many people get taken advantage of because HOAs misrepresent what they control." It felt good to help someone else avoid the nightmare I'd gone through. And it reinforced my belief that HOAs need more oversight and accountability. They wield significant power over people's homes and property rights, but in many cases, there's no real check on that power except expensive litigation. In Minnesota, the state legislature has started looking at HOA reform. There are proposals to require more transparency in HOA governance, create easier dispute resolution mechanisms, and impose penalties on HOA boards that abuse their authority. I've written letters to my state representatives supporting these reforms. If my experience with Patricia can lead to better protections for other homeowners, then maybe some good will come from it. As I write this, it's May of 2026, almost exactly 5 years since Patricia first tried to claim my property as community lakefront. The cabin is still here, still beautiful, still mine. This weekend, Sarah and I are heading up there to open it for the summer season. We'll air it out, check for any winter damage, get the dock back in the water, and spend a quiet weekend enjoying the lake. My son Michael, who's now 17, is talking about bringing his girlfriend up to the cabin later this summer. My daughter Emma, who's 15, wants to invite her friends for a week in July. The cabin continues to be the center of our family's summer life, just as it was when I was growing up, just as it was when my father was growing up. That continuity, that connection across generations, is precious. It's worth fighting for. It's worth standing up to bullies like Patricia Randall who think they can take what isn't theirs. The legal documents from the case are filed away in my home office. The court order, the deed, the survey, the settlement agreement, the criminal conviction records, all of it is preserved, both in paper form and digitally. If anyone ever questions my ownership of the property again, I have overwhelming documentation ready to go. But I don't think anyone will challenge it again. The case was too public, the outcome too decisive. Everyone in the Lake Vermilion area knows that the Thompson cabin is private property, not to be messed with. That's a good thing. It means I can relax and enjoy the cabin without constantly looking over my shoulder. I've also become something of an informal advisor to other property owners who are having disputes with their HOAs. Through word of mouth, people find out about my case and reach out for guidance. I'm not a lawyer, and I always make that clear, but I can share my experience and point people toward good legal help. Last year, I helped a woman named Jennifer Monroe, who was fighting with her HOA over a fence they claimed violated community rules. The problem was, her property, like mine, had never actually been part of the HOA. The developer had sold her house as a stand-alone property, but the HOA had later tried to retroactively include it in their jurisdiction. I introduced her to Mike Hendricks. She fought the case, and she won. Her fence stayed up, and the HOA backed down. Stories like Jennifer's make me realize how common these HOA overreach problems are. All across America, HOAs are claiming authority they don't have, imposing rules that aren't legal, and bullying homeowners who don't know their rights. It's a systemic problem that needs addressing, but for now, I'm focused on my own little piece of Minnesota lakefront, the cabin my grandfather built, the property my family has loved for nearly 6 decades, the place where my kids are making the same kinds of memories I made when I was their age. Patricia Randall tried to take that away from us. She failed. The cabin is still here, and it will be here for my children and my grandchildren and beyond. That's my victory. That's what matters. As for Patricia, I have no idea what she's doing now. I heard she moved to Arizona, trying to start over somewhere new. I hope she's learned from her mistakes. I hope she's not trying to scam other people out of their property rights. But honestly, I don't spend much time thinking about her anymore. She's part of the past, a problem that's been solved and put away. My focus is on the future, on teaching my kids to appreciate the cabin and understand its value, on maintaining the property so it lasts another 60 years, on being a good neighbor and a responsible property owner, on enjoying the simple pleasures of lake life, the loons calling at dawn, the smell of pine trees, the feeling of cool water on a hot summer day. That's what this was really all about. Not legal battles or court orders or criminal prosecutions. Those were just tools to protect what really mattered: family, tradition, connection to a place and a history. Patricia tried to reduce my grandfather's legacy to generic community property, but she couldn't do it. The cabin remains ours, unique and irreplaceable, a testament to one man's hard work and his family's determination to honor that work. So if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, if an HOA or any other entity tries to claim authority over your property that they don't actually have, I encourage you to fight back. Know your rights. Get good legal help. Stand your ground. Don't let bullies and petty tyrants steal what's rightfully yours. The law is on your side if you have proper documentation, and you're in the right. The process might be stressful and expensive, but it's worth it to protect your property and your rights. I proved that, and so have many others who have stood up to HOA overreach. As I lock up my home office and prepare for the drive up to Lake Vermilion, I feel at peace. The fight is over. The cabin is secure. The family legacy is protected. Patricia Randall learned an expensive lesson about trying to take things that don't belong to her. And I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to go to court, even to face down someone with a lawyer, to protect what's yours. The cabin is waiting. The lake is waiting. Summer is here, and it's time to make new memories in the place my grandfather built with his own hands all those years ago. That's what this was all for, and it was absolutely worth it.